the Chief of Staff and the Special Advisor to the President, African Development Bank. Mr. Banji, he got special advisor on industrialization to the President of the African development countries. So he is coordinating the establishment agro-industrial processing zone and industrial policy in several African countries. And he served a very high level within the United Nations system for more than 2 decades. So his last position being Director, Regional Office for Africa, the Chief Scientific Advisor, UN Habitat, and the Director, Monitoring and Research Division. So, but anyway, Banji, he also got a PhD from the Sussex, University of Sussex, the UK, as we study in the UK, in political economy of technological change and industrialization. So let's also give the Professor Banji a warmest welcome to introduce his topic regarding the COVID Relief Fund to African member states. Professor Banji, please.
Thank you so much. One more time, thank you, colleagues. And I enjoy very much the presentation that has been made. Mr. Nile, I've met many years ago, and I'm looking forward to us collaborating on this project in my new position at the Africa Development Bank. I hope one of the deliverables of this conference will be some arrangement by which we can collaborate with Mr. Nile to use the leverage of the bank to introduce his project to as many African countries as possible. Earlier on, I had mentioned about 3 or 4 issues that this pandemic had impacted upon. One is extreme poverty. We mentioned that additional 120 million people might go into extreme poverty. We mentioned also the impact on food security because a lot of farmers have been affected, especially small farmers and small businesses. We mentioned the impact on small businesses also. But also, very importantly, we talked about the issue of schooling. A lot of children might never be able to get back to where they were. So we need to find a solution collectively, as a world, and also for countries in their own respective spaces. Let me mention 3 or 4 issues that I think we should be focusing on. One is debt suspension. I'm glad that there has been a lot of discussion to suspend the debt for the poorest of countries, because without debt suspension, they cannot achieve economic growth. Many of them are struggling now because the livelihood for these countries, most of them, some are exporters of raw materials, exporters of minerals and oil. Again, this is another issue that post this pandemic, I think we need to assist a number of our countries to ensure that they diversify their economies. 50 years down the road, many of them still don't process many of their raw materials. So I think part of the issues I think we should be looking forward to is to help countries to diversify their economies and add value to and process. It might surprise you to know that a lot of African countries are still net importers of food. As of last year, close to $60 billion. Of course, there has been a lot of progress, also because many countries are now also net exporters, but there's a deficit in terms of food import. So one of the first things that we need to recommend is that we need to support African countries in the area of commodity and food production. This is one of the programs that I'm handling at Africa Development Bank, which we call the Special Agro-Industrial Processing Zone. Basically, what you find a lot in Asia, they are more like the special economic zones, but they are focused on the agricultural agribusiness sector. And therefore, the idea is to add certain things to what farmers are currently doing. You try to raise yield, and you see, for example, the tree planting by Mr. Nile. One of the distinctive things about it is the high level of yield through technology, through improved seeds, and so forth. So that's one area that I believe very strongly that many African countries need to go back. In fact, pre-independence, many of them were food sufficient. But some of them found oil, they found minerals, and they ignored agriculture. I'm not talking about agriculture in the old traditional sense. We are talking about modernizing agriculture. The situation, for example, described by our colleagues from the Netherlands shows you the kind of agriculture that we are talking about. When you look at the figures last year, for example, in the Netherlands exported close to 96 billion euros of food. A small country. I lived in the Netherlands for 6 years. So even now, I still try to monitor. I used to teach at the United Nations University. So it's a country that, sort of fascinates me a lot. They don't have so much land, but they have applied modern industrial agriculture to become one of the top countries in the world. So I think modernizing agriculture will be one of the ways post-pandemic in a very intensive way to help African countries. The second area also is to support the building of more resilient health and pharmaceutical sectors. Many African countries today, when you aggregate all the imports, 90% of all drugs, medicines used in Africa are imported, largely from India, China. There's nothing wrong with trade, but I believe that there are certain basic medicines, particularly those of them that are on WHO essential drug list. Countries should be supported to provide and manufacture their own drugs. We saw during this pandemic, for example, when even you have your money, you have no access to medicine. And this is playing out again with the vaccines. 70% of all vaccines that will be produced in this next coming year has been bought up by the rich countries. They plan, and you find that many of the rich countries have bilateral discussions and bilateral agreements with the big pharmaceutical companies. Some of them have ordered more than four times what they need, actually. More than 3-4 times what they need. So what you are going to find is that the projections, according to WHO, is that most developing countries will probably be able to access only 10% of the vaccines they need, or vaccinate only 10% of their population over the year 2021. This is a very dangerous thing because we're in a world where we might create a new system, a new vaccine apartheid, as I might call it. You find some of the airlines already proposing that you need a vaccine passport. Now, what this pandemic has shown us is that the world needs to collaborate. But the consequences of this pandemic is that we are even building more walls to shut out ourselves. So I think we need to rethink carefully what we are going to be doing going forward, particularly with supply of vaccines to poorer countries. But for me, the longer term solution will be that to systematically support countries. It should not be winner take all. We need to support countries to be able to, you find a country like Bangladesh producing 80% of all these drugs. So it's not rocket science. But you find that because of the competitive nature of this market, the big pharma companies are always, very not open to allowing, actually, competition from poorer countries. So the first thing for me is food security and agriculture or agribusiness. The second thing is resilient health and pharmaceutical sector. And the third, of course, is for me to take care of the climate change. I like very much Mr. Nile's solution. You find that one of the things that we are doing at the Africa Development Bank is a program called Desert to Power. It is to light up most of the Sahelian rural areas with 10,000 megawatts of solar power. And it's a big project that had been implemented already. This will require a lot of support. I'll be happy to supply as much information for countries who want to participate. It's a business. It's not just giving out money, it's a business. But we want to do it in a very sustainable way. To recap, well, of course, the bank also has specialized program for women, for the youth. We have what you call the Youth Innovation Fund to encourage young people, because you find that among the youth are the most energetic and creative group of people, as the colleague from Taiwan mentioned earlier. So the program of the bank actually covers almost all of these areas. There are 5 pillars of the African Development Bank called High Five. The first one is called Feed Africa Program. It is designed to support agriculture, $25 billion over the next 10 years. The second one is called Light Up Africa, which includes, of course, sustainable energy solutions. The third one is called Integrate Africa. Integrate Africa is a big program that is supporting the integration of Africa. As you know, the African Union has come up with the African AfCFTA, the free trade area for Africa, probably the biggest zone created up to date, 1.3 billion people. I know there are new zones being created recently, but that's a big zone with over $3 trillion GDP. I think this is an area that there could be a lot of collaboration between Asia and Africa, and an area also in which African countries can trade better among themselves. What you find today is that even when you produce value additions, it's very difficult because of tariff escalation to export to certain countries, particularly in Europe. So creating this zone, I think, will help African countries, as has been done in Asia, to trade among themselves better. Today, tariffs between African countries are higher than tariffs between Africa and other countries. These are the issues that the African Development Bank is trying to also assist with African countries to get rid of. The fourth program in the High Five is called Industrialize Africa. This is, for me, very central to development going forward. Industrialize Africa means simply to modernize every sector, whether it's the agricultural sector, whether it's the medical sector. Industrializing Africa simply means you need to catch up with the rest of the world. So, and that includes small, medium, large enterprises. The bank is supporting countries to process their own minerals, is supporting them to modernize agricultural sector, to provide end-to-end solution, to create zones of prosperity from zones of poverty, particularly in the rural areas. This is where you find the most of the poor people. And therefore, we're trying to upgrade agricultural solutions in those areas. And the last pillar of the bank is called Improve the Quality of Life for Africa. And this is where you find the health, pharmaceutical, and other programs of the bank. So I wanted to give this brief, particularly for partnership reasons. I think what this forum is doing is to create a platform whereby all regions of the world can collaborate in terms of sharing solutions, sharing initiatives, and sharing technological solutions, as colleagues earlier mentioned. So I'm offering on this platform that I will be very happy to work with the organizers to see how we can partner with colleagues who want to partner with countries in Africa. We have connections all over the continent. We can talk to most of the heads of state. We have all kinds of agreements where we can make this relatively easy to work with African states. I want to thank you very much for inviting me, and I look forward to the outcome of this conference. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Professor Banji, for your precious sharing the current policy toward the African modernization, promoted by the African development banks or other, countries. So may I ask you one question? Because you just mentioned about the poverty issues and agribusiness issues and the young generation issue and the food security issues. For those issues is a long-term annoying challenges in Africa. So can you find a new opportunity or new solutions to overcome this kind of long-term annoying issues in Africa, either cooperate with Mr. Nine, the peace or EMS? We just find out a feasible and possible, the project, to work for African people or society, which means what kind of the framework or the institute or other, the concept we can promote immediately to alleviate the issues you just raised earlier. Thank you. Professor Banji, please.
Yes, thank you very much, moderator. This is precisely the point I made. We one of the big initiatives is called the Special Agro-Industrial Processing Zones that the bank is promoting. We have already agreed and given loans to several countries: Mali, Guinea, Senegal, Madagascar. Kenya, for example, they are establishing 4 zones. In South Africa, they are establishing 9 zones. In Nigeria, they are establishing about 6 zones. We are in discussion now to complete the discussions for them to begin construction next year. If you are familiar with the special economic zones, that's almost precisely how it looks like. But the difference here is that these zones will link to the farming community. So we also build facilities within the farming communities, or sorting, drying, storage, warehousing, because one of the big problems of traditional agriculture in Africa are twofold. One is low yields. The yields are very low. So we are helping these farmers, working with universities, international organizations, to raise the yield of farmers, and also to aggregate these farmers into cooperatives and communities and associations. Because what you find at the end of the day, usually a small business or a small farmer is not challenged because it's small. It is because it is isolated. Many of them are isolated. They don't have a voice. They're isolated from finance. They're isolated from funding of any kind. So, but when you put them together, 1,000 farmers, 2,000 farmers within the same community, they have power. So that's one of the support we are giving to them. We are working with IFAD, International Federation of Agricultural Development of the UN. In fact, the particular program that I'm running, IFAD, is almost in every one of them. FAO is part of it. Local development banks are part of them. So we are inviting Asian investors, irrespective of which country you want to invest in. We'll be very happy at the African Development Bank to make that connection. Because at the end of the day, the model is that these zones will be private sector led. They could be state enabled. The country, the municipality, the province can enable it. But you and I know very well, governments don't run business well. So at the end of the day, what we do as the bank is to work with these sovereign entities like countries to put forward, create the environment where the banks, the big, either you have a big company, we companies from all over the world in many of these sites. So we want, putting it out here, that we want as many as possible. Please reach out to us. Dr. T will be able to reach out to me to give you all the information with the bank. And we'll be very happy to collaborate and invite investors from Asia to, in whichever country you want to go to. The bank is present there. Thank you.
Okay, Professor Banji, last questions. May I ask you, because the COVID-19 gave, the precious challenges to African countries or the African society. So have you found any proper development model for this society, which means, as you mentioned, to cooperate with different, the player in ecosystem, either, from the partners from overseas, experts, so on and so forth. So what's the practical approach, for you, to implement the idea of developing, the African community? Yes, please. In your mind.
Yeah. No, thank you very much. As you will observe, I think most of the African countries were able to escape this pandemic far more than happened elsewhere. Maybe like Asia, we also had experience with Ebola, like you had with SARS. So many of the countries were actually a bit far more ready to deal with the pandemic. So they were able to immediately upgrade some of the facilities that were there. As you know, African countries, many of them are not rich, but they were able to do whatever they could with the help of partners like WHO and so forth to stem the spread of the pandemic far better than it was in the other countries. But going forward, as I said earlier, I think these countries would need to build better, more resilient health and pharmaceutical sectors. What we find in the periods when this pandemic was at its highest, particularly in April, June, July, when we were negotiating support. By the way, the bank gave close to $10 billion to support most of the African countries. Some in terms of loans. As you know, they all own the bank, just like the Asian Development Bank. So through loans, through grants, through aids, and so forth, $10 billion package was made possible to support them, because many of them had their economies totally in trouble. So through budget support, but also through emergency support, like hospitals, like test kits, like PPEs and so forth. So what we are advocating, and in fact, right now the bank is coming up with a big health and pharmaceutical strategy. Because of what has happened, the lesson going forward is that we need to support these countries to build better health and pharma resilient system, hospital system, at the very local levels, to ensure that they can respond better and faster. As we say, building back better and faster. So our focus in response to this COVID is that we are supporting African countries to be able to basically manufacture their own basic drugs. I mean, I'm not saying that some of them, some are far more advanced. South Africa, Nigeria, Morocco, Egypt, and so forth. Some of them have big drug companies collaborating, for example, with some of the big European companies. But we are saying that even small and medium companies should be able to do better and manufacture the most pervasive, to deal with the most pervasive diseases instead of waiting. At the height of that pandemic, as I was saying earlier, we suddenly found that several countries had money, but they couldn't even buy because you were right at the very back of the supply chain. Everybody looks after their own citizens first, and this is happening again with the vaccine. So in terms of investment, again, I would say one of the areas that Asian countries could invest is in pharma and health sectors in Africa, diagnostics, PPEs, and all those areas where we want to be sure that next time around, these countries will not be so exposed, because what we find this time around was a real exposure. Many were really badly affected. Food systems were disrupted. The health systems, thankfully, we didn't go into the kind of what you find, say, in the US today. But again, these are poor countries, some of them. So partnership will be key going forward. Focus on food, health, education, I believe, will be very important in helping countries build back and build better. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Banji. Thanks for your final conclusion. We got to build up the global partnership, under auspices of your organization, your banks, and of course the Mission Line, the EMS or the peace. So we may work together hand by hand to help the African to realize the modernization, for the future, especially the post-pandemic, challenges. We see the opportunities. We also see the challenges in effect of us. So thank you. And thanks for your joining this, the flow for discussion. Thank you.